Well, hello and welcome to the Sky Sports Cricket Podcast. My name is Ian Ward. I'll be discussing all things cricket with Nasser Hussain Mark Butcher, and it's a warm welcome to Simon Doull, who has hot-footed it out of India and Ahmedabad from the chaos of the IPL final. You've landed safely in Dubai. How was it, Dooley?
Chaos, crazy. That stadium is absolutely phenomenal. I think that's one of the things we must say. Just over 104,000, I think, last night for the IPL final. Unfortunately, I guess for England fans, Josh Butler's Rajasthan Royals couldn't get the job done. But I think it showed too that the new franchises, how good they were with selection at the auction table. And Hardik Pandya has just sort of grown, in my estimations and in a lot of people's estimations, as a skipper. And that team, certainly, I mean, they found the best out of a David Miller type character as well. But it was a brilliant tournament and a fitting end, I think, although the game wasn't probably, one of the best we'd seen throughout the series.
But you've been out there to the IPL and experienced it all. It is quite a force of nature, isn't it? And now it's got even bigger.
Yeah, there were concerns, weren't there, at the beginning that 10 teams, they'd done it before in the IPL, I think all the way back in 2013, where they had 10 teams and it kind of felt like it dragged on forever. But potentially it did to folks at home in England. But there's absolutely no denying the passion and the power of the entire tournament when it comes to India and Indian audiences. It's just, it's almost 2 months of wall-to-wall cricket excitement, all the stories that come out around it. And it makes superstars and millionaires out of cricketers, which is, I suppose, if you look back to the eras in which we played, that's unthinkable stuff.
Dooley's touched on it there, Nas, the performance of Josh Butler. I mean, that is one thing that the IPL has provided for cricketers all around the world, an education in white ball cricket and how they've improved. I mean, Butler's performances have been staggering. Liam Livingstone did well for a while.
Phenomenal. I mean, it has been great for our white ball side. I don't think we would have won that World Cup if it wasn't for the IPL and sending players over there. It is the finishing school. You have some very fine players and they go off to the IPL and they show that they're great players. And it's sort of self-perpetuating because before that, they didn't want any English players and they didn't want England players. The more that go over, the more that perform, as we have now. Johnny Bairstow has done it for a number of years now, and there'll be more coming up. You can, someone like Brook and the way he's batting, I'm sure we'll come on to him for test matches, but there's so many white ball. Smead was smashing it around for Somerset, obviously Bantam, players like that. So it is a finishing school for our white ball cricketers, but Butler's performance in that tournament was freakish. I mean, every time you put on the telly, he went through a very quiet bit in the middle, but the way he started and the way he ended was just phenomenal. There's one knock in there. I think it was in the knockout game where he was quiet and going around to run a ball. And one thing with Josh Butler, if you leave him till the end and you keep dropping Butler, he will make you pay. And he certainly did.
He went from there and then went into the next game and got the 100. And it was something like 170 off his last 60-something balls. It was crazy stuff. I'm pleased you touched on Livingston because, I've been telling people here how good a player he is and what sort of power he's got. And we haven't seen it. In India, they hadn't seen it. And it was a great thing for him to, I think, just prove to himself as well that he could foot it at that level and just have a, decent year. He only got half a dozen wickets, half a dozen catches, over 400 runs. But, Butler's season, only bettered by the great Kohli season of 16. Where he also got 400s, but got over 900 runs. So great to watch.
Dooley, what's it done for the Indian domestic players and the depth of talent? And it's sort of what we hope for many things from our 100 competition, but, the best players playing together all the time. We hope that will come out of the 100. What's it done for Indian domestic cricketers?
Yeah, I think Butch touched on a little bit there before when he said we wondered whether it would dilute the talent. And that's certainly the complete opposite. It is unearthed talent. We saw a kid called Sai Kishore last night, Mohsin Khan, who I think is probably the most impressive of the newbies as far as the quick bowlers are concerned. They've unearthed Umran Malik last year, and he sort of kicked on this year. Tilak Varma at the Mumbai Indians. There's name after name after name that have come through from domestic cricket and just been picked up in the auction courtesy of that extra two teams. So I think it has improved their domestic cricket no end. And the other thing it's done, what the BCCI do is they now pay their domestic cricketers a lot more money. So even the guys that don't play in the IPL and the T20 leagues, their first-class cricketers are now starting to get paid a reasonable wage, which is something that hadn't happened. I didn't know much about it, but it hadn't happened, even up to 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. The domestic first-class players were getting very, very little, could hardly live on it. So it's now a profession, even for the 4-day Ranchi Trophy players. So it's just brought money into the game. Every kid, and there'll be a women's IPL starting next year. We're hearing 6 teams. So every boy and girl will sort of just want to be involved in the IPL. So it's done amazing things. It's done wonders for them.
Dooley, from the IPL to the test matches over here, Brendon McCullum, your old mucker, has rather jumped ships. He's now on the other side of the fence. Tell us a little bit about Brendon. I mean, you know him as the individual. What is Brendon McCullum, who's now in charge of the men's test team for England, like?
Look, he's got some, I don't want to say simple, but he's got some simple philosophies about the game. He keeps things very much like that, whichever team he's involved in. As a person, some might think the way he played a little bit reckless at times, but the bloke got a test match 300 and a couple of double hundreds. He had the ability to bat for long periods of time as well, but the swashbuckling sort of T20 nature, 50-over cricketer that we saw so often, people might look at that and think that's him, but he is a deep thinker of the game. He's got some interesting theories around it. I think he'll bring he'll bring a philosophy, but he'll also bring some real passion. And what he did with that New Zealand team was just made them play in a New Zealand fashion. I think for many years we almost tried to be Australia or tried to be England or tried to be someone else that we actually weren't. And so he found a New Zealand way. And that's certainly something I see that he'll try and do with England. What is our way? What is our culture? What does county cricket bring to the next level? How do we bring what happens in county cricket? And, I've just been looking at the scores. His runs are plenty. The T20 game is in good stead. The Blasters obviously started really well. So there's talent. How do we bring that talent from that level to the next level, which is a big jump, as we all know. It's a massive jump, but how do we bridge that gap? How do we get that talent? So I think he'll identify it. You'll have to, they'll have to impress him. Players, he'll ask the tough questions. He's a South Dunedin boy, grew up on the streets of South Dunedin, walking around on a Friday night looking for a fight. So, he'll get the best out of them. Don't worry about that.
Did you like the appointment, Butch, when you first heard that Keezy had put Brendon in charge of the men's test team?
Well, it took me aback at first. I mean, he hadn't been on the radar at all, but I gave myself 5 minutes with it and thought it made great sense. You're talking about the sort of philosophy of somebody like Brendon. There's that great quote of his, something along the lines of, prepare like you're going to live forever, play like you're going to die tomorrow type thing. It's a really great
That's
quote.
an Oscar Wilde thing, isn't it, as well?
It might very well be, yes. He's got one or two others as well. They probably don't apply to cricket.
You just don't get this stuff from Rob Key, do you? You don't get Oscar Wilde quotes. Butcher, you're a great addition to these podcasts.
I spent a bit of time with Brendon when he was sort of cutting his teeth as a coach in the T20 leagues in the CPL, and spent quite a bit of time sort of just chatting to him about the way he sees leadership, I suppose. He very much sees his role as trying to get as far inside the head of the people that he has under his charge, in order to try and draw the best out of them. That Doull mentioned it. He's not a sort of a technical coach. He's not going to be standing there at the end of the net and telling them how to play the swinging ball or whatever it might be. But what he will do is he will figure out a way of being able to draw the very best out of players. Now, I have no doubt whatsoever that in England's lineup at the moment, and what are we, 1 win out of 17 or something, there are some extraordinarily talented boys. Not least somebody like Ollie Pope, of course, who's now finds himself batting at number 3. We'll see how that one goes. But there must be a way of being able to draw out the brilliance that we see from Ollie Pope on a regular basis in 4-day cricket. He's the outstanding young player, has been for the last 3 years in county cricket. To get him to transfer that into test matches. Zach Crawley's another one. Now, he's a bit on the precipice at the moment because, the people are running out of patience. The failures have been coming thick and fast. And yet we can all see that if he cracks it, you've got a guy who has an enormous amount of talent and enormous amount to offer. And that is something I think Brendon McCullum, will pit his wits against, and that will be where he adds enormous amount of value to this England team. Make the guys believe in themselves, make them play at the very best of their ability, and if they do that, then England have certainly got enough talented players in the country to do a hell of a lot better than they've done in the last 3 years or so.
Nasser, the cricket that you've seen England play in the Test match arena over the last couple of years, and I know you've got to take into account bubble life, etc., etc. What does Brendon and Ben need to do to create the environment that Butch is talking about? And what is their, I don't know, the first tick in the box that they've got to get right, would you say?
I'd say the obvious tick, and I don't know if it's a captain and to a degree a coach's responsibility, but you can't keep being 50 for 5 and 20 for 2 and Joe Root walking to the middle. You're not winning many Test matches from that position. So it's interesting to hear that he won't be a technical coach, because I do think some of that top order we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years, Zach Crawley is a good example of that. Hugely talented young man, but has a slight technical issue. So I'd like to see some technical coaching. Otherwise, what's the point of having coaches there at all? But I would say that is the first tick you want, because I still think, I know a lot of them are injured at the moment, and that's something we might get onto, but I still think in the seam bowling department, if you have Anderson and Broad and hopefully eventually the likes of Wokes and Curran and, you know, Wood and hopefully Archer a long way down the line, in the seam bowling department, Ollie Robinson I still think has got a massive future. I think you'll do well with the Duke's ball in England, but fundamentally it has been Joe Root and Ben Stokes with the bat that have taken on, you know, everyone around the world. And we have got to stop, or England have got to stop being 20 for 2 and Joe Root striding to the crease. It's not easy, especially in England with the ball moving around, but that's your job as an opening batter in the top 3. Go out there, see off the new ball like Rahul and Rohit did last year when India played. That fundamentally, if they can do that and get runs on the board, I think that will go a long way towards winning games for England.
Well, 2 points to you as well, Nasser, on a broader scale. Tactically, will England be better with a Stokes-McCullum partnership? Some of the tactics you could question over the last couple of years. And equally, when you took over the job with Duncan Fletcher, England were at a very low ebb. The Test match side is a very low ebb. Your first tick, really, in many ways, was make England more resilient, harder to beat.
Yeah, we had to stop the rot, really. We couldn't go from being the worst side in the world to being the best side in the world. We never did, really, until a decade or so later. The difference is, I reckon in that era, we still had some very fine players. If you had a batting lineup of Alex Stewart, Michael Atherton, Graham Thorpe, Mark Butcher, Graham Hick, Mark Ramprakash, you had bowlers like Gough, Caddick, Tufnell, you know, Flintoff coming into the side. You still had some cork. You still had some very fine cricketers. We needed something different. We needed a bit of a kick up the backside. We needed central contracts. I think this particular side needs. I think they need good captaincy. I really do think that. I think they need good selection. Some of the selection over the last couple of years has been indifferent, to say the least. Some of that due to bubble life. I think there's been too much rotation. I think Brendon McCullum said this week he's not going to do rotation. He's going to turn up and pick his best 11 for the conditions. And I completely agree with what Doull said there, actually. Don't confuse McCullum and Stokes with this gung-ho partnership. Brendon McCullum has a triple 100 that took 13 hours to get. And Ben Stokes in that Headingley knock, in his first 66 deliveries, was 2 not out. So they both know how to play the longer game. It is just getting that across to some of the players that don't think, oh, because it's McCullum and Stokes, we all go out there swinging from the hip.
If you look at some of the selections that New Zealand are a pragmatic team, and they started to be under Brendon McCullum. They won't go out there and smash it all over the place. It was old 2 meter Peter at the top of the order would go out there and blunt it for a session and a half. BJ Watling in New Zealand's rise to being the best Test team in the world, BJ Watling was one of their most pivotal players. And how did he play? He was guts and dug himself in and made sure that New Zealand got totals that their bowling attack, who were extremely talented, could win Test matches from. So this isn't a bloke. And New Zealand cricket is not a culture whereby it's just literally, you know, it's every player's a winger and the All Blacks go and win matches by throwing the balls around. It's not that. Yes, they have talented blokes who can go out there and take the game by the scruff of the neck, but they also do the basics unbelievably well. And I think, Doull, that's the core of their success. And it was also the core of Nasser's team's success or relative success, as they went from being the worst side in the world, courtesy of New Zealand, back in '99, to sort of becoming very, very difficult to beat, and in the end beating everybody except Australia until they beat Australia. And this thing took a little while, but it was built around core principles of doing the basics very, very well. And I don't think Brendon will go far away from that. And he can't anyhow. England don't have the sort of the embarrassment of riches to do anything other than that. And I don't think you could say, having watched them play particularly over the last year, 18 months or so, that they do the basics particularly well. No balls with wickets, dropping catches, losing wickets in clusters. These are basic things, and they're the things that need to be turned around by this new management group.
Spot on from Butch about New Zealand's philosophy and the way they played. That was built around a little bit of aggression here and there at times, but Kane Williamson became one of the top four, I suppose. One of the great four that they talked about time and time again. Tom Latham, I think, has had a huge role to play in the side. And you think about what New Zealand do at home, it's very similar to the England circumstance, I think, where we play on very green pitches, and you lose the toss half the time. You have to go out there and bat on a very green seaming pitch, and it'll do plenty for the first 2 hours, 3 hours. And Latham has been brilliant and just negating that new ball, leaving the ball really well. So he's been one of the key players along the way as well. And Butch mentioned BJ Watling, but then you throw a Nichols who's a little more aggressive, and you throw McCullum in there who was very aggressive at times. Williamson, Watling could steady the ship. He never scored runs, BJ Watling, when New Zealand were 300 for 4. He scored them when they were 80 for 4. That was just the way he was. He saved that team time and time again. And then you cross over to what transpired to have 3 guys with in excess of 200 test match wickets in Wagner, Southey and Bolt. And New Zealand had never had that. They'd never had a side with 3 guys with more than 100 wickets. So all of a sudden you got 2 over 300 and 1 over 200 to just bring a bowling attack together. So it took a long time, and I don't think Brendon's going to fix England overnight, but I still believe there's an enormous amount of talent in England, but it's just how do they find it? How do they get the best out of it? And what's the best roles for those certain players that are coming in? Do you pick a young Brook straight away? Is Ollie Pope, should he bat at 3? Is he only batting at 3 because they want to protect Joe Root at 4? What are the theories around, and how do they work it out? And it's not going to happen in 6 months' time, and hopefully it doesn't happen in 3 tests.
We're going to come back to that in just a sec. But Nas, with Stokes, what is the biggest challenge of being England captain?
It just becomes a 24/7 job, really. It's just, you can't switch off. I don't know what Ben Stokes is like as a cricketer, as an individual. Away from the game, I only really see him around the dressing room, and he is full on with everything. He's going to need to find a period just to switch off, because I can imagine, having seen Ben in the working hours and at nets and at practice, he doesn't do anything at 90%. He does everything 100%. And if you do that as a captain, it will burn you out pretty quickly, because it is 24/7. So he's going to have to learn to get away from it. It's not easy, because you're constantly in between test matches. You'll have meetings, selections, you'll have other things going on. You'll be thinking about the decisions you had made and the decisions you want to make. So it's a full-time, it's the best job. I'm making it sound like it's a bad job. It's not. It's the best job in English cricket. So he'll love it. I hear he texted Rob Key once Joe Root had stood down, and he said to Rob, look, if you think, I'm available if you need me. So he's desperate to do the job now that Joe Root stood down. He'll do it brilliantly. Everything else he's done with an England shirt on, he has been brilliant. He will give it his full attention. He'll just need to switch off every now and then, get something else in his life, golf or something, just to make sure he gets away from the pressures of being England captain.
And how can Key and Brendon McCullum help take some of that pressure off him? Because fundamentally, you're England captain, and the win-loss ratio is on your watch, not on McCullum or Key, well, it is, but to a lesser extent. So if some of the stuff that I saw Joe Root having to do in and around test matches, it's just like, Joe, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You need to go and put your head in the ice bucket and think about the game. Stop worrying about that. That's all well and good. But when the win-loss ratio goes against your name, and Ben being full on, as you've just said, he'll want to do it all, but he'll have to be reined in, won't he?
Well, not reined in. He'll just have to be looked after a little bit. You know, the first thing they'll have to do for him and do well is select well for him. So you can be the best captain in the world and you can be the best coach in the world, but if you don't select well, you really are playing the game with one hand tied behind your back. So that's a decision Rob Key has still got to make. And I would argue it's probably his most important decision. Who is going to be the national selector, the head selector, to pick the best 11 players? So that's going to be vital. It's going to be slightly easier. I do hear that Joe Root, you're spot on. Joe Root was doing everything during COVID times, even deciding like who can go down the swimming pool, where can you eat breakfast, not eat breakfast, and you're still trying to captain England. You're still trying to go out there to bat at 20 for 2 every single time. So they've got to take some of the even small stuff. And our bosses at Sky are not going to like this. You know, Joe would do us every evening if we asked for him. Did we ever ask Joe Root for an interview and him say no? He'd come out, whether he was 50 not out, 100 not out, he'd come out and do it. Sometimes they're just going to have to say, Ben, you just do Sky and whoever at the end of the game. They're going to have to look after Ben Stokes because he's a triple format player. He does all 3 disciplines and he's brilliant in the field. And just with his bowling, they're going to just someone keep an eye on his overs as well. You know, you want a captain that's on the park and an all-rounder, not someone that constantly is in and out the side.
It's an interesting one on selection. I'm going to come to you here, Dooley, because Ashley Giles gave the selection role to Chris Silverwood, who was in charge of the men's test and ODI side. An unbelievably tough and arduous job. He split the coaches? Fine. How do New Zealand select? Does the coach have a say in selection, much as Chris Silverwood did?
Yeah, Gary certainly has a say in selection. Kane has a say, and there's a group of I think it's about 3 or 4 of the coaches and sort of past coaches around New Zealand that have input into what certain players are doing and how they're going about their business as well. So at the end of the day, the buck stops with Gary Stead and Kane Williamson. But there is input outside of that as well from various coaches and various talent spotters around the country. So it's a fairly simple, way to go about it. I think I didn't agree with Chris Silverwood having the one and only say, and I think he was handed a bit of almost a poison chalice at times with that whole selection situation, having just been given the job as well. It's almost, you know, in horse parlance, we call it the owner, trainer, driver. You know, he's trying to do everything at once and it just didn't quite work. So, New Zealand's point of view, I think it's worked. It's worked well. Gavin Larson was part of the selection panel as well. So there was a 2-way and then Kane had a say. So it became a sort of a three-pronged attack.
But how should it work in England, Butch? Because we simply have more cricketers, more cricket to keep across, unlike New Zealand.
I don't think. I think they've tried to reinvent the wheel, really, haven't they? I mean, I'm still a little bit baffled as to the circumstances around the decision being made to remove Ed Smith. You know, regardless of whether you like the character who's the head selector, it doesn't mean that the job shouldn't exist. And so, you know, Dooley said he didn't agree with the decision to have the coach be the selector as well. I haven't found anybody that thought it was a good idea, not one. Least of all, probably Chris Silverwood as well. So look, you need a selector. You need a chief selector who has 2 or 3 lieutenants, busying themselves around the country, seeing players live and being able to speak to people. I mean, it's not rocket salad. You can't reinvent the wheel with this. That's how it's been done in the past. That's how it needs to be done going forward. Who those people are. I mean, look, Ed Smith's difficulty, I think, or the problem with Ed Smith was that for some reason he wanted to insert himself into the dressing room the whole time, and he kind of, you know, he got on the wrong side of a lot of players, probably the wrong side of his captain, probably the wrong side of his coach, and they wanted him gone. Now, I think he did a terrible job as head selector. He's obviously thinks outside the box a little bit and can be a little bit too clever by halves for some people's liking. But I don't think he did a terrible job as selector. And if he was to throw his hat in the ring again, I would seriously consider, depending on what the other candidates are, you'd seriously consider letting him have another go, but telling him to stay well clear of the business, which is what happens in the dressing room and around it.
Well, that's this first test side, or first and second test side, has been selected. Harry Brook's in there, very talented batsman in fantastic nick, extremely exciting. Potts also has come in, Matty Potts. When you that squad, does it excite you?
I mean, it's a safe squad, isn't it? It's very difficult when a new era comes in because they have to be a little bit loyal to the previous era and the players. It wasn't their fault that there's this sudden turmoil in English cricket and everyone's been changed. The lads that went to the Caribbean, like Alex Lees, has only played 3 test matches. So you got to give him another go, especially coming back, and he's got a load of runs in front of the England captain, Ben Stokes, up at Durham. He's played well. They've gone with the 2 form horses, one with the bat in Harry Brook. He just can't stop scoring, running any format. You put on your TV and he's 50, 60 not out. He's just a phenomenon. He's gone on and got big runs in the championship. And Potts has got, 35 first-class wickets, again, in front of the England captain. That doesn't do you any harm, especially with the list and the long list of injuries in the bowling department. The one they could have been a bit more not left field, have taken a little bit more of a pump with, would have been to play the leg spinner Parkinson, or at least have him in the squad. But I think with it being the first test, June, Lords, leg spin at Lords, I think they've stuck with Leach. And it's a big 2 or 3 games for certain players like Leach, like the 2 openers, Lees and Crawley. I think it's a massive 2 games for Zach Crawley, because I see Compton got another 100 yesterday against the touring side New Zealand. He's getting runs for fun. Sam Robson, I think, is come back and done very well in the last couple of years. The lad Tom Haynes down at Sussex, Rob Key has spoken about him. So there are 2 or 3 opening batters out there that are pushing for selection. So there's a big couple of games ahead for those 2 openers.
So a couple of things, Butch. Harry Brook is in nick. That would be the perfect time for him to make his test debut, not when he's falling out of a bit of nick, right when he's at the peak of his game. Would you like to see him play? Do you think he will play? And what challenges will face Ollie Pope now that he, we can have a debate about whether Joe Root should bat at 4 or 3. He's going to bat at 4. That's what the captain said. So it's almost irrelevant. So Pope is going to bat 3. What are the challenges he's going to face there?
I mean, the challenges are the same ones that he's faced whether he's batted at 5 or when he was first put into the team at number 4. He got picked by Ed Smith, funnily enough, and to bat at 4, having only ever batted at 6 for Surrey, and got his record was incredible there. Found it very, very difficult. Has since sort of been in and out of the side. He had flashes. Go back to the South Africa tour. When were we there? It would have been before COVID, wouldn't it? Just previous to COVID. England win 3-1. And Pope makes 100 in that series and looks every inch a test match player. And for some reason, things have gone downhill for him then. It basically, the challenge is, of course, as batting at number 3, is that you're an opener in many respects. You can be through no fault of the 2 guys ahead of you in very, very early. And so you've got to have 2 games, haven't you? You've got to have the sort of like the opening game, playing for your off stump, being able to line it up well, that sort of judgment. And number 3 is also required at times to go in there and take the game on a little bit, and kind of throw a counter punch. Ollie's biggest thing really is in his own head. He's had massive technical issues. He's wandering around. The 2 dismissals in his final test match before being left out for the West Indies trip. He was on the trip but didn't play. Was the biggest illustration of the things that Nath and I have been talking about this whole off stump guard thing. The first innings, he defends the ball on 8th stump, nicks it to slip. And the second innings, he's so far across on his stumps, he gets bowled by a straight ball round his legs. It's the biggest extreme, illustrating why that particular method is problematic. So, by all accounts, he's playing really, really well. He's scoring lots of runs in county cricket. He's almost completed that. If it was a computer game, he's done it. Can he transfer that undoubted talent into a calm enough mind to go out there and take on what's a very, very stiff challenge in terms of New Zealand's bowling attack and the challenge of batting at number 3? Not easy, really not easy.
So sticking with you, Butch, Harry Brook, would you try and get him in given the form he's in? I mean, I was trying to look at it. Perhaps the only way you could get him in is you've got the two openers, Pope at 3, Root at 4, maybe Brook at 5 instead of Bairstow, and then you've got Stokes and Folkes. But are they going to go Brook ahead of Bairstow?
I would think not. Johnny's made 200s in his last 4 Test matches.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they were going to leave Johnny out, then he wouldn't be in the squad, as far as I can see it. So
there is another way.
Yeah, he keeps wicket.
Johnny keeps and Folkes
Johnny
doesn't
keeps
play.
Wicket, goes down to 7. Folkes doesn't play. Brook plays. Yeah, I see that too. I mean, you know, there's another issue going back to the sort of number 3 thing. You know, one of Rob Key's, it's not a blind spot, but one of Rob Key's areas where he's going to come under a lot of heat is the whole Zach Crawley, you know, thing. He's championed him for years. He's in the team. He's having a bit of a struggle. Now, I thought that if Crawley was going to play, you might well have, you know, somebody like Sam Robson, because I like the idea of having guys who've been in the team before. It's what happened to me. The guys are a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth, a little bit sort of more battle hardened to the whole thing. So it might have been a good opportunity to pick somebody like Robson to open the batting. If Crawley has to play because of the, you know, the backing he's going to get, I still think that number 3 is a better spot for him than opening. Don't ask me why. It's just a feeling I have. And so you could have done it that way. But you're right. You know, Ben Folkes had a very, very tough time of it in the Caribbean, but has come out and averaged 100 in the championship for Surrey. He also didn't keep very well. It has to be said. You know, the keepers union will think it's sacrilege, but I was surprised by some of the errors that he made, albeit in very, very trying circumstances. You know, very long periods of time in the field in the Caribbean, but more than half of the team are kind of like not guaranteed to be playing in the series against South Africa in however many Test matches time. And so, you know, it's going to be some nervous boys in that dressing room, I can tell you that.
Bowling, Dooley. I'm going to start with the 2 old campaigners, Broad and Anderson. They're back. Were you surprised that they have had to come back and they were omitted from the West Indies trip?
I was surprised they had to come back, that is for sure. It's funny, actually, I travelled this morning on the plane with Ricky Skerritt, who was obviously in charge of West Indies cricket, and it was one of the things we talked about. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe the fact that Broad and Anderson were not in the West Indies, and they didn't have to face them and didn't have to worry about them. So I am not surprised that they are back at all under Stokes and Brendon McCullum. And you know, who knows? I think Stuart Broad's got more than this summer in him. Has Jimmy Anderson at his age? Has he got the miles in his legs to go again after this home season? I don't know, but I think Stuart Broad has, and I think that they need someone like that to just lead that bowling attack for another 18 months and just show them. I mean, he's a terrific competitor, Stuart Broad. I mean, they both are, but if I'm looking slightly longer than the 3 tests against New Zealand, they need someone like that, I think, to bowl the tough overs, to bowl those hard overs when it's really, really hard. And you know, Nasser and Butch, you guys all know about how hard it can be, Test match cricket, when you haven't got a wicket for 45, 50 overs and you want a bloke you can throw the ball to who you know is going to run in and give you everything he's got. And so you need that in your side. I was really surprised. I'm pleased for them that they're back. I know they'll be working their backsides off to get it right and to make sure that they're 100% ready to go.
Dooley, you touched on it there, how hard work fast bowling is. There is a list of injuries now in English cricket. I'm trying to go through them all. Wood, Archer, Fisher, Mahmood, Woden, Stone, Curran, although Sam's back playing. There's so many. Robinson couldn't play that game because he went stiff in the back. Tash Farrant has gone, in the women's game, has gone with a stress fracture. What is it that's happening at the moment? Is it just one of those things, or is there something that they bowled too much, they bowled too little? As a bowler, what's going on, mate?
I'm a big believer in bowling fitness, and I think you see that with, and if I can think back to the 3 guys that sort of spring to mind in the last 20 to 25 years, as far as quick bowlers are concerned, Doull really missed a Test match. He wasn't gym fit. He was bowling fit. Glenn McGrath very rarely missed a Test match. Jimmy Anderson very rarely missed a Test match. They're the 3 guys I look at and I say, you don't look at Jimmy or Glenn McGrath or Dale Steyn and think they've been in the gym pumping some weights. Geez, look at their guns. Look at, they're just not that way inclined. They are bowling fit. Now, you've got to get legs and miles into your legs for a start. So runners, Trent Bolt's another one. They've got to be runners and athletes, and just get bowling fit. Now, bowling fit doesn't mean you have to be bowling hundreds and hundreds of overs, but your body has to be put through that repetition, even at 50, 60, 70% leading into a season. You've got to have bowled sort of 1,000 balls a week, I think, even if it's only you start off a couple of yards and then you work through from a couple of yards to 3 to 4 to 5 every second day leading into a season. All of these little things that I think make you bowling fit, get your body attuned to it, rather than being gym fit. I know there's a place for plyometrics, for some certain weights. I think you've got to have a big caboose to be a genuine quick bowler. So I've got no problem with getting in the gym and doing some squats and things like that. But outside of that, you don't need beach muscles to bowl quick.
We'll go into our big caboose, Nas. What do you think Rob Key will do when some of these strength and conditioning coaches start getting into bowlers' ears about hot spots and red zones and all this sort of stuff? I mean, my one thing I think it's a strength of Rob is he's cynical, and that isn't a criticism. Cynical meaning he will question everything. Why are we doing that? Why on earth are we doing that? Let's get some common sense back into this. Do you think that's where he'll stick his nose in a little bit? Yeah,
and I think he should really. I mean, you do leave it to the experts. Rob Key as we know, is not an expert on many things really. So you can't be butting in on, scientific things or whatever. So he's where he is good. He is old school, but he is also willing to learn. And from the modern cricketer, he's not that far out of the game. So I do think he's not just someone who's stuck his head in the sand and gone, that's not how we used to do it. He's willing to learn from. But if those procedures and those things that they're doing are not working, Rob Key's the sort of guy that will pick up a phone and say, well, hold on, I've given it your way. You've done it your way for a long time. Here's the list of injuries, or here's us 50 for 5 again. Or here's the selection not been right. We're going to do it my way now. So he's not afraid of upsetting people. It's just when to make sure that you put your beak in, if you know what I mean. He is just director of cricket. At some stage, he's made the big appointments. At some stage, Rob is just going to have to, fade away back onto that golf course and say, over to you now. Thursday morning, Rob Key's done his bit. It is about the players now. You players go out there. We have not batted well enough. Apart from, some seamers that have stayed fit, we've got too many injured bowlers. Our spin bowling department is a little bit bare, and I hear there's talk of Baby Moeen and Adil making themselves available again. Butch touched on it there. No balls, wickets, catching. Get the basics and the fundamentals. That's not a director of cricket role. That is not even a captain role. It is players, individual players taking responsibility and doing their jobs.
That's just touched it there, Butch. Thursday, the test match starts. It's Lord's, first test of the summer. For those that have not been fortunate enough to play in a Lord's test match, what's it like?
Oh, it's fabulous. It's you know me, I have no interest in ever strapping on a pair of pads or playing cricket ever again. But the thought of, the 2 days, the Tuesday, Wednesday lead up into a Thursday start and a Lord's test match is just magnificent. I got a little frisson of excitement just thinking about it. Best place in the world to play, great occasion, great event. The cricket can be challenging sometimes in early season at Lord's. The ball might go around a little bit. There's some fabulous seam bowlers on both teams, but it's not to be missed occasion. You have to really enjoy it. So be nice to the bloke on the gate. Don't if you're expecting them to abuse you, they will. So go in, give them a smile in the morning, that type of thing, and enjoy what is one of the great occasions for any test match player.
Well, I'm sure the Black Caps are looking forward to it dearly. But looking down at their squad, no Ross Taylor. Obviously, that's one of the big names that we won't be seeing in this series. What are the strengths of this New Zealand squad?
Bowling's generally been the biggest strength in the last little while. Tom Latham, obviously, mentioned earlier, has been a great strength. Kane Williamson has been, but I've never seen Williamson in such poor form or struggling so much. And I watched the.
Is he fit?
Yeah, he's fit. I talked to him prior talked to him prior to leaving for the IPL. Nasser and I were in. Where were we? Mount Maunganui, weren't we? And Trent and Tim and Kane Williamson and Neil Wagner were having a net session. and he was absolutely fine. He had his time off, and he was rearing to go. So we were down there for the Women's World Cup, and they were all rearing to go for the IPL. But boy, he's had a horrendous time of it. I mean, strike rate well under 100. Opening the batting in the IPL, you just cannot be doing that. So he's been horrendous form. I saw him get nicked off yesterday in that tour match for naught. He's just going through a terrible time of it. Losing Nicholls, I think, is a big blow. Henry Nicholls is a very, very good player. He's been one of the mainstays of that middle order. So with his little injury, I can see New Zealand going with 2 all-rounders in the middle, with Mitchell at 5 and probably de Grandhomme at 6. So, there's a little bit of vulnerability around that area. Conway, 1 test at Lords, he finds it easy. He loves it as much as Butch does. It's pretty simple for him, so he'll be fine. The bowling unit, as I say, it's been a strength. Kyle Jamieson, second-year blues. It's been one of the little issues for him, just getting it right. And do we play a spinner? Does a Jazz Patel play? It's hard to hard thing to say that you come off a 10-wicket haul and you don't play the next 2 test matches. It's just, what other country in the world does that? Who does that? And then he should have played. He should have played in that Bangladesh test match at Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui, and the ball turned and New Zealand got beaten by Bangladesh, and he should have been playing there. But I think I've got a feeling they'll play him. They'll play him in the first test.
Really, what's the situation with Trent Boult? He played in that final yesterday. What was he saying to you?
Yeah, look, he's been getting a little bit of work in with the red ball, and in between the white ball stuff here in India. Sorry, I don't think he'll play. I don't see him play. I don't see either of the left armers playing, actually, him or Neil Wagner. That would be my thoughts around the side. I think they'll go in with Southey, Henry, Jamieson, the 2 all-rounders in Mitchell and de Grandhomme, and a Jazz Patel. With Blundell sliced in there at number 7, the keeper. So I think they'll keep Trent Boult on ice for probably the second test match, which it won't make him happy. So it might make him a little more hungry for that second test match. I think, looking at the preparation, I just don't know that he can go into a test match without, some real overs under his belt, which you'll get in that 8 to 10 days from the time he arrives today to the second test match, which is, the 10th or the 9th? It starts on the second one. So, I think he'll get enough overs under his belt then.
Really, just a couple of things. Kane has England has been, or batting in the UK has been kryptonite a little bit to Kane Williamson. I think he only averages like 25, 26 in the UK. And they've also got this issue with Devon Conway. Is he going to bat at 4, do you think? Because obviously his success has been opening or batting at 3. So is there a little bit of a chink there in the lineup as far as the top order is concerned? And Broady obviously has Latham on toast as well. I mean, there are certain little chinks of light for England with New Zealand at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a good opportunity for England to start really well under this new regime. Broad around the wicket to the left-hander. We know what he's done to David Warner. We know what he can do to Tom Latham. I see them going with Latham and Will Young. Will Young's had a good time of it in England. He's been up at Durham a couple of times and played really well. Got good runs. I know Kane wants to bat at number 3, and he has been our number 3. I wonder whether in time he needs to just move to 4 and Conway to 3. And as you talked about, I think you made a great point about your number 3 basically is an opener. He could be in second ball of the test match. And so you've got to have those opening attributes. And I just wonder whether over time Conway might end up at 3 and Kane might end up at 4. And whether that's a slightly better fit in England. And the reasons around that average of mid-20s, I think, for Kane is that the ball just does a little bit. And he's, that little area around 4th, 5th stump for Kane Williamson, when he nicks it, when he looks to run it and it just moves a touch, that's when he's been found wanting in England. That little angle bat shot that he likes to run down towards third man and get off strike, it just nips a little bit more in England and therefore picks the edge up. We've seen him either, nip back LBW because he gets across to that off stump, or just picks up the outside edge time and time again. So that's something that he'll have to look really closely at, I think, this series.
You back-to-back hundreds from New Zealand's captain. Write him off at your absolute peril, I would say. We're immensely pleased to be able to bring you the first test from Lords, which starts on the 2nd. It's a great occasion, and we're looking forward to the International Summer of Cricket getting underway. But this test match will be also quite a sad event for us and the game of cricket itself, because obviously we lost the great Shane Warne in March. We lost a dear friend. And a couple of things we're going to do. We're going to rename it the Shane Warne Test, basically. The commentary box, MCC have kindly allowed us to rename our commentary box the Shane Warne commentary box. After 23 overs of cricket on the first day, we will stop and there'll be a minute's applause, 23 of course being Shane's, a great number. And we've got a couple of documentaries on Shane, simply titled Bold Shane. So there's a couple of those for us to look back on him, the person, and the phenomenal career he had. Nasser, I watched on this sofa, you speaking so eloquently at the MCG, an amazing occasion, that state funeral. I mean, it looked spectacular and a fitting way to say goodbye to the great man. What was it like?
It was an amazing occasion, not just the couple of hours of the ceremony, but everything around it. The hotel I was staying at, through the park there, you walk through and you get to the MCG, and there were people walking through days after days to lay, memorabilia at that statue outside the MCG, the great Shane Warne statue. And by the end, there were like cans of VB and Tui's and Vegemite and St Kilda's, the Aussies do it their way, and there was like, St Kilda AFL scarves and everything. And we went in, I was lucky enough to be invited into the dressing rooms where, all of Shane's family and friends were there. And what struck you immediately was that Shane, just at both ends of the spectrum, the great and good of the world, pop stars, cricketers, superstars of any sport were there. But his mates from St Kilda, his mates that he'd go and have a beer with and a drink with and a pizza and a bowl of chips with, they were there, and they were all, his family were there. And obviously it was a very emotional occasion, but Shane would have been so proud, his home ground, the things he did there, the hat-trick against us, the 700th wicket, Andrew Strauss. He did some amazing things around the world, but he did some amazing things at the MCG as well. And his family and his kids that day, the way they spoke, how they spoke, Shane would have been very proud of his family that day.
Well, we would, of course, be focusing on the cricket when we get to Lords, but also remembering the great man. 10 o'clock on Thursday for the start of the Test series, England against New Zealand. We're underway at 10 o'clock on Sky Sports Cricket and Sky Sports Main Event. Many thanks to Nasser, to Mark, and to Simon Doull. We'll see you at Lords, Dooley. You'll be flying. You've done some air miles, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got some miles under my belt. I can tell you that much. Flying,
but you're out the bubble. You're out the bubble. You're
finally,
free.
Finally, I'm free. I'm looking forward to a pint in England. I can tell you that.
Very dangerous.
I'll get you a pint, Dooley.
Oh, why?
We'll film that and put it on the doco. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you at Lords.